Okay, friends, today we are getting into building the ANTAHKARANA with the introductory teaching on the science of the ANTAHKARANA. We shall not here deal, for the student will find it in the book Education in the New Age. That preliminary presentation should be studied before taking up the more advanced stage, which begins here. Let us now consider step by step this science, which is already proving a useful source of experiment and testing. The human soul, in contradistinction to the soul as it functions in its own kingdom, free from the limitations of human life, is imprisoned and subject to the control of the lower three energies for the major part of its experience. Then, upon the path of probation, the dual energy of soul begins to be increasingly active, and the man seeks to use his mind consciously and to express love wisdom on the physical plane. This is a simple statement of the objective of all aspirants. When the five energies are beginning to be used consciously and wisely in service, a rhythm is then set up between the personality and the soul. It is as if a magnetic field were then established, and these two vibrating in magnetic units, or grouped energies, swung into each other's field of influence. This happens only occasionally and rarely in the early stages. Later it occurs more constantly, and thus the path of contact is established, which eventually becomes the line of least resistance, the way of familiar approach, as it is sometimes called. Thus is the first half of the bridge, the ANTAHKARANA, constructed. By the time the third initiation is completed, this way is completed, and the initiate can pass to higher worlds at will, leaving the lower worlds far behind, or he can come again and pass upon the way that leads from dark to light, from light to dark, and from the lower worlds into the realms of light. Thus the two are one, and the first great union upon the path of return is completed. A second stage of the way has then to be trodden, leading to a second union of still further importance, in that it leads to complete liberation from the three worlds. It must be remembered that the soul, in its turn, is a union of three energies, of which the lower three are the reflection. It is a synthesis of the energy of life itself, which demonstrates as the life principle within the world of forms, of the energy of the intuition or spiritual love wisdom or understanding, and this demonstrates a sensitivity and feeling in the astral body, and spiritual mind, whose reflection in the lower nature is the mind or the principle of intelligence in the form world. In these three, we have the Atma Buddhi Manas of the theosophical literature, that higher triplicity which is reflected in the lower three, and which focuses through the soul body on the higher levels of the mental plane before being precipitated into incarnation, as it is esoterically called. Modernizing the concept, we might say that the energies which animate the physical body and the intelligent life of the atom, the sensitive emotional states, and the intelligent mind have eventually to be blended with and transmuted into the energies which animate the soul. These are the spiritual mind conveying illumination, the intuitive nature conferring spiritual perception, and divine livingness. After the third initiation, the way is carried forward with great rapidity, and the bridge is finished, which links perfectly the higher spiritual triad and the lower material reflection. The three worlds of the soul and the three worlds of the personality become one world wherein the initiate works and functions, seeing no distinction regarding one world as the world of inspiration, the other world is constituting the field of service, yet regarding both together as forming one world of activity. Of these two worlds, the subjective etheric body, or the body of vital inspiration, and the dense physical body are symbols on the external plane. How is this bridging Antakarana to be built? Where are the steps which the disciple must follow? I deal not here with the path of probation, whereon the major faults should be eliminated and whereon the major virtues should be developed. Much of the instruction given in the past has laid down the rules for the cultivation of the virtues and the qualifications for discipleship, and also the necessity for self-control, for tolerance, and for unselfishness. But these are elementary stages and should be taken for granted by the students. Such students should be occupied not only with the establishment of the character aspect of discipleship, but with the more abstruse and difficult requirements for those whose eventual goal is initiation. It is with the work of the bridge builders that we are concerned. First, let me assure you that the real building of the Antakarana takes place only when the disciple is beginning to be definitely focused upon mental levels, and when therefore his mind is intelligently and consciously functioning. He must begin at this stage to have some more exact idea than has hitherto been the case as to the distinctions existing between the thinker, the apparatus of thought, and thought itself, beginning with its dual esoteric function, which is 1. The recognition and receptivity to ideas, all capital, as we know that comes from the highest, and 2. The creative faculty of conscious thought form building. This necessarily involves a strong mental attitude and reorientation of the mind to reality. As the disciple begins to focus himself on the mental plane, and this is the prime intent of the meditation work, he starts working in mental matter and trains himself in the powers and uses of thought. He achieves a measure of control. He can turn the searchlight of the mind in two directions, into the world of human endeavor and into the world of soul activity. Just as the soul makes a way for itself by projecting itself in a thread or stream of energy into the three worlds, so the disciple begins consciously to project himself into the higher worlds. His energy goes forth through the medium of the controlled and directed mind into the world of the higher spiritual mind and into the realm of the intuition. A reciprocal activity is thus set up. This response between the higher and the lower mind is symbolically spoken of in terms of light, and the lighted way comes into being between the personality and the spiritual triad via the soul, just as the soul came into definite contact with the brain via the mind. This lighted way is the illumined bridge. It is built through meditation. It is constructed through the constant effort to draw forth the intuition through subservience and obedience to the plan, which begins to be recognized as soon as the intuition and mind are in rapport, and through a conscious incorporation into the group and service, and for purposes of assimilation into the whole. All these qualities and activities are based upon the foundation of good character and the qualities developed upon the probationary path. The effort to draw forth the intuition requires directed, occult, but not aspirational meditation. It requires a trained intelligence so that the line of demarcation between intuitive realization and the forms of the higher psychism may be clearly seen. It requires a constant disciplining of the mind so that it can hold itself steady in the light, and the development of a cultured right interpretation so that the intuitive knowledge achieved may then clothe itself in the right thought forms. It might also be stated here that the construction of the bridge whereby the consciousness can function with facility both in the higher worlds and in the lower, is primarily brought about by a definitely directed life tendency which steadily sends the man in the direction of the world of spiritual realities, plus certain movements of planned and carefully timed and directed reorientation or focusing. In this last process, the gain of the past months or years is closely assessed. The effect of that gain upon the daily life and in the bodily mechanism is as carefully studied, and the will to live as a spiritual being is brought into the consciousness with a definiteness and a determination that makes for immediate progress. This building of the ANTAHKARANA is most assuredly proceeding in the case of every earnest student. When the work is carried on intelligently and with full awareness of the desired purpose, and when the aspirant is not only aware of the process but alert and active in its fulfillment, then the work proceeds apace and the bridge is built. It is wise to accept the fact that humanity is now in a position to begin the definite process of constructing the link or bridge between the various aspects of man's nature, so that instead of differentiation there will be unity, and instead of a fluid moving attention directed here and there into the field of material living and emotional relationships, we shall have learnt to control the mind and to have bridged the divisions, and so can direct at will the lower attention in any desired manner. Thus all aspects of man, spiritual and natural, can be focused where needed. This bridging work has in part already been done. Humanity as a whole already bridged the gap between the emotional astral nature and the physical man. It should be noted here that the bridging has to be done in the consciousness aspect and concerns the continuity of man's awareness of life in all its various aspects. The energy which is used in connecting in consciousness the physical man and the astral body is focused in the solar plexus. Many today, speaking in symbolical terms, are carrying that bridge forward and linking the mind with the two aspects already linked. This thread of energy emanates from or is anchored in the head. Some people, fewer of course in number, are steadily linking the soul and the mind, which in its turn is linked with the other two aspects. The soul energy, when linked with the other threads, has its anchor in the heart. A very few people, the initiates of the world, having effected all the lower syntheses, are now occupied with bringing about a still higher union with that triple reality which uses the soul as its medium of expression, just as the soul in its turn is endeavoring to use its shadow, the threefold lower man. These distinctions and unifications are matters of form, symbols, and speech, and are used to express events and happenings in the world of energies and forces in conjunction with which man is definitely implicated. It is to these unifications that we refer when the subject of initiation is under consideration. It will be useful if we repeat here a few statements made in an earlier book. Students should train themselves to distinguish between the Sutratma and the ANTAHKARANA, between the life thread and the thread of consciousness. The one thread is the basis of immortality, and the other is the basis of continuity. Herein lies a fine distinction for the investigator. One thread, the Sutratma, links and vivifies all forms into one functioning whole, and embodies in itself the will and the purpose of the expressing entity, be it man, God, or a crystal. The other thread, the ANTAHKARANA, embodies the response of the consciousness within the form to a steadily expanding range of contacts within the environing whole. One is the direct stream of life, unbroken and immutable, which can be regarded symbolically as a direct stream of living energy flowing from the center to the periphery and from the source to the outer expression or the phenomenal appearance. It is the life. It produces the individual process and the evolutionary unfoldment of all forms. It is therefore the path of life which reaches from the monad to the personality via the soul. This is the thread soul, and it is one and indivisible. It conveys the energy of life and finds its final anchor in the center of the human heart and at some central focal point in all forms of divine expression. Naught is and naught remains but life. The consciousness thread, the ANTAHKARANA, is the result of the union of life and substance, or of the basic energies which constitute the first differentiation in time and space. This produces something different, which only emerges as a third divine manifestation after the union of the basic dualities has taken place. The life thread, the silver cord, or the sutratma, is, as far as man is concerned, dual in nature. The life thread proper, which is one of the two threads which constitute the sutratma, is anchored in the heart, whilst the other thread, which embodies the principle of consciousness, is anchored in the head. This you already know, but this I feel the need to constantly reiterate. In the work of the evolutionary cycle, however, man has to repeat what God has already done. He must himself create, both in the world of consciousness and of life. Like a spider, man spins connecting threads and thus bridges and makes contact with his environment, whereby gaining experience and sustenance. The spider symbol is often used in the ancient occult books and the scriptures of India in connection with this activity of the human being. These threads which man creates are triple in number, and with the two basic threads which have been created by the soul, constitute the 5 types of energy which make man a conscious human being. The triple thread created by man are anchored in the solar plexus, the head, and the heart. When the astral body and the mind nature are beginning to function as a unit, and the soul also is consciously connected, do not forget that it is always unconsciously linked. An extension of this 5-fold thread, the basic 2 and the human 3, is carried to the throat center, and when that occurs, man can become a conscious creator on the physical plane. From these major lines of energy, lesser lines can radiate at will. It is upon this knowledge that all future intelligent psychic unfoldment must be based. In the above paragraph and its implications, you have a brief and inadequate statement as to the science of the ANTAHKARANA. I have endeavored to express this in terms, symbolic if you will, which will convey a general idea to your minds. We can learn much through the use of the pictorial and visual imagination. This bridging must take place. 1. From the physical to the vital or etheric body. This is really an extension of the life thread between the heart and spleen. 2. From the physical and the vital, regarding them as a unity, to the astral or emotional vehicle. This thread emanates from, or is anchored in, the solar plexus and is carried upwards by means of the aspiration till it anchors itself in the love petals of the egoic lotus. And 3. From the physical and astral vehicles to the mental body. One terminus is anchored in the head and the other in the knowledge petals of the egoic lotus, being carried forward by an act of the will. Advanced humanity is in the process of linking the lower 3 aspects, which we call the personality, with the soul itself through meditation, discipline, service, and directed attention. When this has been accomplished, A definite relation is established between the sacrifice or will petals of the egoic lotus and the head and heart centers, thus producing a synthesis between consciousness, the soul, and the life principle. The process of establishing this interlinking and interrelation and the strengthening of the bridge thus constructed goes on until the third initiation. The lines of force are then so interrelated that the soul and its mechanism of expression are a unity. A higher blending and fusing can then go on. I can perhaps indicate the nature of this process in the following manner. I have stated here and elsewhere that the soul anchors itself in the body at 2 points. One, there is a thread of energy which we call the life or spirit aspect anchored in the heart. It uses the bloodstream, as is well known, as its distributing agency, and through the medium of the blood, life energy is carried to every part of the mechanism. This life energy carries the regenerating power and coordinating energy to all the physical organisms and keeps the body whole. 2, there is a thread of energy which we call the consciousness aspect or the faculty of soul knowledge anchored in the center of the head. It controls that response mechanism which we call the brain, and through its medium it directs activity and induces awareness throughout the body by means of the nervous system. These 2 energy factors, which are recognized by the human being as knowledge and life, or as intelligence and living energy, are the 2 poles of his being. The task ahead of him now is to develop consciously the middle or balanced aspect, which is love or group relationship. We're going to leave it there for today. My recommendation, only a recommendation, is based on what was said earlier in this section, is to open up and read Education in the New Age. It's a rather short book. I actually started it last night, and I'm going to continue on that as a side project to finishing this book as well. So, and maybe we will read that at some point, but you can see here are some pages to be gleaned for sure. All right, well, have a good one. See you soon.